From shopping and social media to email and online banking, the use of smartphones, computers and the internet are central to modern life. Cybersecurity is about protecting these devices and the services we all use, both online and at work, from theft or damage. It's about preventing unauthorized access to the huge amount of personal information stored on these devices and online. Whether as an individual or within an organization, maintaining a good level of cybersecurity reduces the risk of islanders suffering a cyber attack. Cyber attacks can result in significant financial costs, major economic disorder, loss of trust and support in businesses and institutions, environmental disturbance, impact on citizen welfare, and in the worst case, a threat to life. In a small, interconnected community such as Jersey, imagine the damage a cyber incident could cause. The Jersey CERT are here for islanders with advice, help, and support, so please do get in touch.
Thank you very much. Welcome to CERT. For those who don't know me already, I'm Matt Palmer. I'm the director of CERT. I joined last year. I have with me a small team. Now, I'm not going to get them all up here. Not all of them will want to come up here, but I'm going to invite them to stick their hands up if they so wish to be identified. My team coming in. Thank you. Where else? Yes, we have Morgan at the back here. James, welcome. Paul, welcome. Somewhere hiding at the back is Stephen. I'm sorry, Stephen, but your name gets mentioned anyway because you have done such fantastic work helping pull all of this together. Thank you. CERT is not going to be a big team. It's a small team, but we are hopefully going to be a team of skilled, helpful professionals here to help you secure the island. One of the consistent themes that I've mentioned throughout all of this is that it takes an island to secure an island. It is not our job to secure everybody else by some sort of magic potion or whatever else it is. It is genuinely hard work, and as we've heard this morning, there is a lot going on, a lot to think about, a lot to be concerned about, and actually a lot of solutions. So before I move on to the rest of my bit very briefly, can I just thank again our sponsors today? I have a relationship going back some years with some of them. Others do with others as well. But the one thing I was saying to someone earlier is the nice thing about all our sponsors today is they all have practical solutions that actually work. Buying things in cybersecurity is difficult. That includes finding conference sponsors, and it is really fantastic to have such a great bunch of supporters, all of whom I would happily use and see used on the island. I hope that will only grow in time. And a big thank you to the Channel Islands Information Security Forum for all their fantastic hard work. One thing before I do move on, this is going to be a slightly interactive session, just to warn you. The following session also will be a slightly interactive session, so if you're planning to snooze off, now's not the time. I'm sorry about that, because I'm aware it's sort of an hour after lunch, and perfect time for a snooze, but please don't. So thank you for that. If you are online, we do have a number of people online today. You can submit a question online. We haven't had any yet, but if you do submit a question, they all come up here, so whoever's speaking can respond to those questions. So please do. So what did I learn this morning? And what I learned this morning was how horribly wrong I was in 2013. In 2013, I produced a security awareness deck for the company I was then working for. And one of the things was to get people to take security seriously. The other thing was to get people to not overreact and move into sort of panic territory, or assume that every threat, no matter how ludicrous, was legitimate. So one of the things I highlighted was an article back then in a journal called The Register, for whom we have somebody here who writes. And I highlighted this as an example of the sort of abject nonsense that gets circulated in cybersecurity. Not because the way the Register wrote it, they wrote it very impartially, but because of what had been reported to them. And what had been reported was, their headline was, "Don't brew that cuppa, your kettle could be a spam bot." Russian report says Chinese appliances hide Wi-Fi slurping spam spreaders. well, how wrong I was to describe that as nonsense. It seems the specific story may not have been, may not have been where you have been, may not have been there, but we have actually now seen the practical demonstration of hacking a kettle. So clearly, if you're asking me to predict the future, then you must take that with a pinch of salt, particularly in cybersecurity. However, it gets more serious than what Ken showed us earlier. Because on the 28th of February this year, on BBC News and a number of other sources, is this headline: Isle of Man kettle parts firm hit by cyber attack. Strix, which is based in Ronaldsway, says the incident had no impact on orders or sales. Well, I'm delighted for the company and the Isle of Man, but somewhat concerned about the headline. What we once thought was ludicrous is now reality. It can be practically demonstrated, it actually happens, and it has a real effect on companies, including those in Jersey and Guernsey and the Isle of Man, in smaller jurisdictions around the world where we might otherwise think that we are quite boring. I would be very surprised if a kettle parts manufacturer spent a lot of board time on cybersecurity. As it turns out, I was wrong to have that expectation, and perhaps they were wrong too. So it is a complex environment. So is this a real, is it a practical, is it a threat we should worry about day to day because we don't all make Wi-Fi kettles or all the rest of it? Well, this is my CERT phone, issued to me very kindly by the government of Jersey when we set up CERT. Use it for all sorts of things. One of the things I don't use it for is usually engaging with cyber criminals, but very occasionally one chooses to engage with me. So I'm going to tell you about this particular attack because it is a very straightforward, very operational, very day-to-day attack of the sort we see hundreds, maybe thousands of in Jersey. Firstly, I have a message on WhatsApp from somebody who I don't know. It turns out that individual has a lovely photo, and it's a young lady in a red dress with a glass of wine smiling at me. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a balding, overweight, middle-aged bloke. It's very hard to just instantly turn away from that and say that's got to be nonsense. You do tend to look at the picture. So I confess, look at the picture. I then read the text message, and the text read, "Hello, Mr. George, my secretary gave me your contact information. If you have time, can we talk in detail about your office rent?" Now, that could be, what is that? I'm not Mr. George, in case you didn't get the name earlier, so definitely not Mr. George, and I'm not renting an office from this lovely lady. So is that a cyber attack? Does it sound like a cyber attack? Who would vote for cyber attack? Yeah, a few real cynics in the room, yeah. Bitten, hardened cynics that you are. My first assumption was that actually that's probably somebody working for like an estate agency who's just got the wrong contact details. So I reply back, sorry, wrong number. Now, has everyone here ever got a number wrong, contacted the wrong person? Yeah, I have. What do you do when that person says wrong number? Sorry, yeah, sorry, won't bother you again. You don't necessarily expect ongoing engagement. So the next message is, oh really? My secretary gave this number to contact George. Are you not Mr. George from London? Okay, well now I'm thinking that this is not the normal response to, but you can see it would be a plausible response. It would be easy to suck into that, particularly if maybe you were looking at the picture more than the words. So I reply, sorry, 200 miles away. I don't know anybody called Mr. George apart from one guy who randomly beat up my postman 20 years ago. Hopefully not the same chap. Have a good weekend, though. And I was assuming that if that previous one wasn't the end of that, this would be now the end of it. The response, I'm sorry, I think my secretary must have given you the wrong number. I hope you don't mind. Okay, this is clearly, there's clearly, so no one's going to continue to engage in this. So I said, no problems, good luck with it. Then I get the response, and this is where they pivot from just general engagement to trying to use compliments or encouragement to engage. So I'm expecting this. Thank you for your understanding. You are a kind gentleman. Acquaintance is fate. Where are you from? And the next thing you do after you compliment is you try and get that person to share something about themselves. You've got engagement. Now, this is fun. I sat next to my son, so I was showing him how these threats really work in practice. So I thought, well, we'll engage with this one for a minute. And of course, one of the things I want to do is work out whether that's a targeted attack or non-targeted. So I give them some true information. So I say Jersey. Now, one of two things is going to happen. They're going to respond to that with something they know, or they're going to respond with a generic answer. Nice place. I'm from Ukraine and live in Zurich since I was young. Generic answer, it's a non-targeted attack, but it's still an attack. Let's face it, that lovely lady from the estate agency probably doesn't have a photo that accurately represents her. Yeah. So I reply, okay, this is sounding fun. I'll do something fun for my son. I say, yeah, nice place, but don't see much of it from prison. At least you can get a phone in these days. The response, no, I live in Zurich since I was 2 years old. So like, fine, let's see what happens. I said, they gave me 15 years to life, so I won't be able to see it, I say. Who gave you? The police, when they caught me, banged to rights. That's what happens when you sell dodgy double glazing here. Let's see if they're still playing. What are you selling? Windows. We can get you good finance if you send me funds to my PayPal account. Response. You seem like a boss. This is an engagement with an individual. He turned out to be from Nigeria, actually from Nigeria, as many of them are, and was less inclined to talk to me after this point, presumably because he had better things to do. But I think it gives you an idea of the sort of day-to-day just operational attack that goes on. Untargeted, probably just targeting a random mobile number. On the other hand, there is another type of attack. Actually, you know what, let's do a quick poll. Who thinks they would have spotted that? Yeah. You might not, because the ones that you spot are the ones that aren't perfectly targeted for you. But you might get 100, and the one that is perfectly targeted to you will be very hard to spot. So be careful. However, not everything is quite as easy to spot or to stop. So in addition to those day-to-day attacks, we have serious, large-scale attacks of the sort that if I walked into a boardroom 10 years ago and said, what we need to worry about is Russian cyber war attacking our company, I would have been marched out in a straitjacket. If I went into a boardroom today and said that, everybody, yep, fine, okay, let's sit down and talk about it. The world has moved on. And it is real. So what I would like to do is I am going to do this for the first time ever, quote from an academic paper in an after-lunch session. But it's really fascinating, trust me. So this is space security lessons learned from the Viasat cyber attack, produced by a team at Johns Hopkins University in the United States. Who's familiar with the Viasat attack a few months ago? Generally, just so I have a rough idea. Some are, many are not. Well, what happened was there was a targeted attack on a satellite network, and the goal of that attack was to take out the satellite network over Ukraine. The impact of that was it had a wider impact across Western Europe. Yeah. So that's just a bit of background. And it happened within hours of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, so it probably doesn't take a genius to say where is the source of this attack coming from. Viasat is a satellite communication provider that experienced an outage of its KA-SAT network on February 24th, 2022. Thousands of end-user terminals through the use of malware wiper were disabled, preventing many users from connecting to the network. The outage is the most significant publicly disclosed attack against the space system in recent history. Furthermore, the attack is the first instance of a cyber attack serving as a first digital strike in a military conflict, occurring just an hour before the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. Lastly, the added complexity of the dual use of it is being leveraged as both a commercial and military asset. So it serves a military purpose and a commercial purpose. So you've got this dual use, you've got an impact on the general economic order from a military attack. The next bit, though, is where it gets interesting. The satellite, it turns out, and I didn't know much about this, has three main parts. A space segment, based on the Eurostar E3000 bus and manufactured by EADS Astrium. And that has been launched into geostationary orbit by a Russian Proton-M rocket from the Cosmodrome of Baikonur in 2010. There's then a link segment, and that has 82 spot beams configuration and 10 Earth gateway centers connected to the internet, providing 70 gigabits of throughput per second. If you don't know what all of this means, don't worry, nor do I. But it gives you an idea of the complexity of it. And then there's a ground segment. 10 Earth gateway stations managed by another company, Eutelsat. Oh no, their subsidiary, Skylogic. And they are in Madrid, Spain, Cork Island, Rambouillet, I hope I pronounced that right, in France, Turin, one in Italy, one in Berlin, one in Finland, one in Athens, in Greece, and one in Cyprus, connected through various levels of redundancy, managed by broadband provider Skylogic. Quite a lot of suppliers, quite a lot of complicated infrastructure in there. But because it's a satellite company and it's serving military providers, you would expect a relatively high level of security. The Viasat cyber attack involved an attacker that exploited weaknesses of the KA-SAT ground segment to disrupt its communication network. Now, what they don't know is exactly what that was, but it does say, a paragraph later, we can surmise that the attacker used the unpatched VPN to access Skylogic's Earth gateway stations, or POP server for open internet. Now, they worked this out because in 2021, the provider Fortinet disclosed an attack on their VPN, FortiGate, exploiting a vulnerability from 2019. Now, you have all of this taking place over then a period of several years between a vulnerability being identified and an attack taking place. So whilst we're all sat here wondering, why is Russia's sort of cyber capability not having more of an impact than it has? When you stop to think about it, there's an awful lot of work involved in leveraging something like that to achieve that sort of goal. The really interesting thing about it, though, is why did it affect the world outside of Ukraine? We hypothesize that the attacker's spillover effects in Germany and other European states are due to either an error or simply the selection of cells that contained Ukraine territory overlapped. Well, that spillover effect, so Germany wasn't targeted, Europe wasn't targeted, but we were impacted. And we might think, well, surely this doesn't happen terribly often, hasn't happened before. The problem is it has happened before. So a couple of great case studies. One was mentioned earlier, was the NotPetya attack in 2017. I think it was targeted at Ukrainian tax software. Had a global impact. Just look up the MERS case study on the Wired website if you want to learn more. But you can go back even before that. So Stuxnet, anyone remember Stuxnet? Yeah, Stuxnet was the attack on the Iranian nuclear energy stroke nuclear warfare capability that they were building. It's not been formally attributed, but the assumption is that that's companies, that's countries other than Iran, obviously, with advanced capabilities who maybe don't agree with Iran. So you can reach your conclusion, or you can read one of the good books on the topic. I'm not going to attribute it on stage, but it's on video. But there is a tendency here of these advanced, in addition to the basic attack I talked about before, these advanced attacks having a much bigger impact than was expected in very, very unpredictable ways. And that is what we are now up against. And to make that more complicated, that example I read you from that academic paper, did anyone count how many suppliers there were in that? There were quite a few, and it goes on over the page with more suppliers. You've got at least 10 suppliers acknowledged in there, never mind their downstream supply chains. Yeah? Again, with the Kettle company in the Isle of Man making parts, the Kettle we saw on stage, these are complicated environments to which to operate. So we have lots of vendors, lots of complexities, lots of opportunities to attack. And this is where we like to say, as cybersecurity people, to defend sort of ourselves from the errors, well, attackers only need to get lucky once, defenders need to get lucky all of the time, because you've got to prevent everything. Well, that's not really true, to be honest. Yeah, attackers need to get lucky with something like that quite a lot of times in order to be able to prosecute some sort of advanced attack. Yeah, as a defender, I don't actually need to stop it every time at every layer with every controls perfectly. All I need to do is to make sure that any attack that could affect me, there's at least one control that's going to work. Ideally 2 controls, 5 controls. And then if one doesn't work, it doesn't matter. But something is going to stop. Everything doesn't have to stop, just something does. So this cybersecurity problem, it is actually one that is solvable. It's not inconceivable to think that we might actually come up with a solution. So how are we doing that? So CERT, our goal we've defined as to prepare, protect, and defend the island from cyber threats. There's a reason for that. If we talk about an emergency response team and responding, we're already too late. This isn't actually the best way to respond. What's the best way to respond to a cyber attack? Answer is best way to respond to a cyber attack is, of course, not to have one. Yeah, it's that is the really difficult bit. So that preparedness bit, that really matters. So just to explain what that means in practice, I'm going to take the last few minutes of my time on stage, do this. Let's do a ransomware attack. But I'm going to ask you for your help. So how does a ransomware attack start? Someone volunteer. Dave? A phishing email. Great. So we've got a phishing email going through. Who's the phishing email going through? It's going through to my company. Great. Now, a couple of ways to do a phishing email, one of which is just to falsify somebody else's email server, pretend like it's them. How would I spot and defend against that? A spoofed email. Anyone? There must be one techie in the audience somewhere. DMARC, great, okay. Or a number of other different technologies that I can do, email configuration, Tessian, various other different solutions. You see how I got the sponsor name in there to thank them for helping us out. Various other different solutions that we could look to deploy. Alternatively, let's suppose I want to get past that as an attacker. I could actually compromise my company's downstream supplier. So I'm now doing a business email compromise with the downstream supplier in order to send my phishing email. So my phishing email looks legit. Yeah, it's come through, it's reached me on my email account, and it's talking about a conversation we've already had. Dear Matt, further to our conversation last week, here's the file that you asked for. Can you review it today and get back to me? What can I look for to not click on that? We really are short on techies who are awake today. Come on, guys. Dave.
Sense of urgency.
A sense of urgency, yeah. So it's saying tomorrow. I've got to do this tomorrow. Anything else anyone would look for?
Any links or anything, but if it's an attachment, it's a bit difficult.
Yeah, this one has an attachment to an Excel document and 2 links to the same thing. So a few giveaways. Yeah, this might actually not be totally legit. Other things include things like spelling errors or just changes in how someone communicates with you. Let's suppose that email's coming from Dave. I know Dave. If Dave emails me and say, "Dear Mr. Palmer," yeah, what does that say to me? I would be either he's mad at me, which is perfectly possible, to be fair, perfectly possible, and I would understand, yeah, or it's not from Dave, yeah, okay. So I've got a chance to spot it, but if I've not spotted and I look at this and I've got to go back to him. It's really important. It's my lawyer, it's my accountant, it's business partner. Click and open the document, and the document is a Word document with a malicious macro in. How can I stop that? Disable macros. Did I hear something else? Several different answers. So I can disable the macro. The links, actually, I can also protect because I can stop you from clicking on the link by filtering out the malicious website or whatever it is, if it's that. Lots of different ways I can do that. Fundamentally, don't click on macros. Fine. So you stop me clicking on the macro. Now it's got a warning button. What do I do as a user with urgency when there's a warning button telling me not to click? Click. I need this document. Yeah. I almost did it yesterday on an email from Jersey Football Association. And then I realized it was sending me through to the wrong link. Yeah. So you have to be careful. It wasn't what it was meant to be. But I'm clicking on this as a user. Let's suppose I have now clicked on this. Yeah. It's possible. We're not all geniuses, and even those of you who are going to make mistakes sometimes. So we've clicked on the link. My computer is now compromised. I have ransomware running rampant across my network, except maybe I don't. Is there anything I can do to stop that ransomware running rampant across the whole of my network? Sorry, one at a time. Anyone? Pull all the cables out. I was hoping for something a bit more preventative, though. That would potentially work. Shut it down. Anything preventative? Anti-malware is good. Anything else? Network segmentation. There's a number of different controls I can implement to try and reduce the spread of that ransomware. Let's suppose I fail. Yeah, every single computer in my organization now has a giant red screen saying I've got to pay 50 million quid in Bitcoin. What do I do next? Yeah. Restore from backups. Where are the backups? In my organization, we back everything up to the cloud. And we back everything up to the cloud using the same admin credentials that we use for the rest of our network. How good are my backups? Well, they are for the attacker because I restore that data. It may be no good. It's complicated. But let's suppose I just want to deal with this now. So I've had it. All my computers are impacted. My customers are moaning. My staff are upset. I'm getting calls from my board saying, what's going on? Get a grip of this. We thought we were paying you to do a decent job. You're our executive team. What do you mean you've been attacked by criminals? What am I going to do? Yeah. That may actually be I've seriously thought about that from time to time. Yeah. I'm not going to do that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I can either pay this ransom or I can not pay this ransom. That's not actually the only choice I've got because it says they want 100 million in Bitcoin. And I want to maybe give myself more time to fix things. So what could I do? I could negotiate. So I'm going to go back to the hackers and I'm going to say, thanks for that. I can't give you 100 million because I don't have 100 million, but we're having a sensible conversation about how we are going to deal with this. They come back and say, indeed, then give me a couple more minutes. Great, okay. Oh, a couple more days, sorry, I'm thinking a couple more minutes on the time there. Hopefully they give me more than that or it's not much use, is it? So a couple more days, fine, okay. We negotiate sensibly and eventually we do things. So one of the things I do is I call my cyber insurance provider. My cyber insurance provider, yeah, you've got 20 million quid of cyber insurance cover. What do I then do? Do I go and declare that to the attackers? No, please don't. Whatever you do, do not declare your cyber insurance to anybody. Yeah, because all they will do is say, "Great, we know you're good for that." Yeah, so don't do that. So I'm not going to do that. I'm negotiating, and eventually I get them down to 50 million quid, and I then have this 50 million. I have a choice: do I pay or do I not pay? Yeah, if I don't pay, my backups are compromised, my board is furious, my customers are irate. I don't know whether my company will survive. If I do pay, I might get the data back from the hackers, or I might not. They might just keep the money. I may be able to recover it, or I might not. And can I trust that data at the end of the day? Never mind the fact that if I'm in Jersey, I probably have to do KYC and AML checks, which means having a nice chat with the attacker with their passport. Unlikely to happen. But putting that to one side for a minute, am I going to pay or not pay? Who would pay? Who would think about paying? Sorry? Who's the ransomware? We don't know, but yeah. It's not me. I do not have the Maldives thing lined up, in case you're wondering. Who's going to pay? Seriously. I mean, I know no one's sticking their hands up, but really? Is no.
How good that be the ransomware?
Yeah.
A lot of the encryption techniques,
Yeah.
not all that. That
Fine.
would be a lot of the
Fine.
decryption flows that would be from computers.
Absolutely. So we need some advice and assistance and support. Very good step. So we've got the advice, assistance, and support, and they say it's a legit ransomware from a legit ransomware provider. What am I going to do now? We're going to pay or not pay? Pay. Anyone else say pay? Couple of pays. That's quite realistic because globally 66% of people pay. So that's literally everyone that side of the room and not you guys. How many hands just went up? Nobody. So actually these issues, when they happen to us in practice, turn out to be a lot harder than we think we are when they're looking at them up front. So it becomes quite a difficult problem to solve, and it's about a number of things. So we're not going to pay. Great, right answer. Don't know what happens to the company. We probably do survive. We probably are able to restore. We probably have backups from somewhere else. Our customers on board will at the very least thank us for our ethical decision and for not paying criminals. But I don't know what's going to happen after that point. It's a risk. Yeah. So we've got through our cyber incident, and we need to think about what we can learn from that cyber incident. Well, I'll tell you what I learned from the cyber incidents that I've seen. One is that this risk of spillover that I talked about earlier is very real. Just because you're not being targeted doesn't mean it's not going to happen to you. It is, because that's the nature of it. These attacks are very easy to disseminate globally, very hard to contain. The vendor complexity is a real problem. You could talk about Internet of Things and all sorts of other aspects of this, but fundamentally, one piece of technology or one solution is dependent now on a large number of companies. Making sure we know what they're all doing is very hard. How can we start to solve some of these things? Well, one of the things that happens is this incident happens to me, and I'm embarrassed about it. I don't want to say that I've been hacked. I really don't want to say that I've just paid a criminal gang to get me off the hook. Yeah? And unless it's had a huge impact and that's publicly visible, I'm going to tend to stay quiet. The problem with that, to Ken's point earlier when he was talking about hacking planes, is nobody knows what the near misses and the incidents are. We can't prepare, we can't be ready, we can't advise others to stop them. When we do know, and CERT's been in this position a few times over the last year, we have then been able to go to other companies locally and say, look, this has happened. It could happen to you. This is what it looks like. Look out for it. And on several instances, that has stopped an attack from succeeding. That's what we want to do. So that is about information sharing. It's about collaboration. It's about having the right support. It's about those success factors that were talked about earlier in terms of Ukraine, doing the right housekeeping, doing the right data sharing, having the right support and engagement. And CERT has a role to play in that. Yeah, we can bring to bring that together. So where are my CERT colleagues again? Sorry. They're over at the back there. Feel free to talk to us, engage with us, build relationships with us, because that is ultimately how we begin to do this. I will end on that note. Thank you very much, and thank you, David. I will hand back over to you.